Hi, everyone. Welcome to class. Today's essential questions are you a lover or a fighter? Do you have to declare war for it to be a war? And also, can animals war? Let's introduce.
Talk about that.
I thought we might. Let's introduce today's teachers. My name is Mr. Linton. When I was in college, we had an intramural basketball team. A lot of other teams, they had uniforms, colors. Sometimes they special ordered jerseys because they apparently had money. My intramural basketball team decided that we would just draw our jerseys on our skin with Sharpies.
What? Like you were
How
shirtless?
long did that take to wash off?
We were shirtless, and we drew the numbers and our names and like little straps for the shoulders to make it look like a jersey, but it was just our skin.
This was allowed during a regular season game?
It was intramurals.
Oh, intramurals. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
I gotcha.
Well, that's special.
we did that.
How long did it take to wash off?
I don't remember.
Okay.
That's not important.
Are you sure?
You couldn't see it when we had our shirts on.
I suppose. Am I supposed to go next? You're just staring at me.
Oh, sorry. Do I have to toss? I knew I was going to screw this up. Okay, let's throw to
Loser!
to my left for those of you who are watching on the YouTube.
I am Mr. Walter, and apparently I'm so bad at talking into a microphone, they revoked my mic stand privileges. I have to hold one now.
They is a strong word. I didn't do this. Mr. Rabbers did this to you.
You approved.
I thought it was hilarious. That's a different thing, but it is pretty funny.
We follow through on consequences.
You were
Natural
Welcome
consequences.
to Classroom Management 101.
I hope your wrist and elbow are super tired when we're done with this.
It's pretty cash.
And I'm Mr. Rabbers, and in grade school, I think this was 4th grade, I was involved with a couple friends with taking some steel wool and a 9-volt battery and just trying to burn paper during recess away from the teachers.
Uh-oh.
They, to my knowledge,
For science.
either they never found out or it was never, we were never gotten in trouble for it. And I feared getting in trouble all the way through high school. I think I was afraid of getting found out for this, for having some repercussions.
How much paper did you set on fire?
I don't think it was a ton.
A ton would be a lot of paper.
That would be a lot of paper.
Ton being a figure of speech. It was maybe just a couple of scraps. And I remember someone we were like, okay, let's try with something else. Someone brought in a copper coated scrubby dishwasher thing.
A Brillo pad?
Brillo pad. No, not Brillo pad. Like scrubby. Brillo pad's like the green thing with grit in it.
Yeah.
Anyway, we tried to work that with obviously that did not work the same way as steel wool. So we did, it was like some science was happening. I'm not sure how much learning actually took place.
Were the other students as interested in it for the science things or just for the burning?
Probably more just for the burning.
But you were in it for the science.
I was in it. I was quite the pyromaniac when I was younger.
Every child is an arsonist at heart.
Pretty much,
That's
yeah.
true. That's true.
There might be some more dumb things in the future to talk about with me and fire.
Despite all of that, we are still the smartest guys in the classroom. Welcome to class, everyone. On today's class, we're going to deal with war. Now we had a previous episode on the morality of revolution. If you did not listen to that episode, you should definitely go check it out with the Reverend Margraf. It was a great episode, I think. And we kind of talked about when is revolution, and so war is kind of related to that. And we're going to talk about wars today. But look, one of the essential questions was, are you a lover or a fighter? I am very much a lover, not a fighter, and I would guess that the two gentlemen at this table with me would also consider themselves to be lovers, not fighters.
I'm not sure. I like a good war.
Not fighting in it. You're not going to fight in a war.
I feel guilty that I didn't serve in the military.
Good for you.
We'll unpack that later.
I think 2 years of service should be mandatory.
That's the way it is in South Korea?
In the Koreas,
in a lot of
in
Germany.
Russia,
There's a lot of
quite
places,
a few
yeah.
places, yeah.
No.
I think it should be mandatory.
All right, again, that's maybe a topic for a future episode. Intrigued, but we got to get to the stuff that's actually on the already trying to derail the episode.
That is my prerogative. That's why I'm here.
In world history, there were certainly some wars that were necessary, many that were probably not. We're not going to talk about those today. Today, we're going to talk about some wars that were just downright stupid. and how we set this up is we each researched a couple of wars that we think are dumb, and we're going to educate you about these wars and their dumbness. And I think I'd like to start with Mr. Rabbers. Mr. Rabbers, tell us about your chosen war.
Yeah, so my first war is the Lobster War during the early to mid 1960s. So the backdrop of this is we've got France versus Brazil for this war. France is in a position in the 60s where it is kind of compelled to voluntarily give up a lot of its African colonies. That was kind of in vogue during the time, colonialism.
Well, look, Hitler kind of makes everything uncool, you know?
Yeah.
And when
Pretty much.
if Hitler tried to empire, you can't really do it anymore.
Yeah. So they give up their African territories and colonies, and what they lose, one of the things they lose with that are the fishing grounds for their sweet, sweet lobsters. And so they are...
Those sweet, sweet lobsters. Have you tried some sweet, sweet lobster today? Come down to France. We got plenty. Not anymore.
And so they start looking elsewhere for these lobsters, and they hear of the fishing grounds or lobstering grounds off the coast of Brazil. And as I've read it, they kind of do this backhandedly, where they apply for research grants to take a couple of vessels in to, I think, research some seismic activity along with looking at some of the wildlife in the area. And they do that, and the Brazilians agree, and they do some research, but they also then start to gather a lot and fish a lot of lobster in the area. So the Brazilians find
it's
this
for
out.
testing, I promise.
Yeah, and when I was hearing about this, I kept thinking about, was it Whale Wars? Is that TV show on Animal Planet?
I have no
With the
idea.
Japanese whaling vessels and the team from, I forget what European country, trying to interrupt. And the argument from the Japanese is always, we're doing it for research, but also probably for food, and it's still kind of illegal. Anyway, they're doing these kind of underhanded fishing, and there's this back and forth. To cut the matter short a little bit, there's back and forth about like, what are you actually doing there? We're trying to reapply for more fishing or more research, and eventually it reaches a point where they're going to court because they can't decide if a lobster is a fish or not. Because there are two provisions in the Geneva Convention, apparently which France signed, but Brazil did not sign. So
That tracks.
if the lobster is a fish, then the French would have a right to fish it beyond the 12 miles of the sovereign territory. After that, it's international waters, something like that. But the Brazilian saw it more as a resource, like clams or something that is set, because lobsters, they do kind of stay on the ground, but they also migrate. So there's this murky definition about like what is a fish, what's a resource.
Leave it to the French.
So they have this legal battle.
I'm just imagining people in very respectable men in suits arguing about whether lobsters are fish or not.
Yes.
Your Honor.
If you just look at this graph, I think it clearly states that lobster is fish. I mean, it's a crustacean, but I mean, they don't really concern themselves with scientific definitions. It's more the definitions as laid out in these treaties.
I think it follows the same policy as school lunch programs for whether tomato pasta sauce on the pizza counts as a fruit or a vegetable or not.
Sometimes very lenient with the definitions. So anyway, this is kind of going nowhere fast. And from what I understand, there is an escalation in military activity. The Brazilians are starting to seize more and more French vessels, and the French are starting to send more military craft to support the fishing. The leader, the French leader behind all this, like some would have caved or would have found a more diplomatic solution sooner, but the French leader at the time is Charles de Gaulle.
Okay.
Who, I don't know, Mr. Linton, could you tell us some about his leadership style or his exploits from the World Wars?
No.
Okay. Nuts. Anyway, I was hoping for a great segue. Anyway.
Yeah, sorry. No, I would love to, but I don't really.
I get the feeling he's a little bit more of a war hawk, quite a strong arm.
His reputation, I think, you'd be right on that, but I can't support it with stories or evidence.
Yeah. So there is almost some armed conflict. Like it gets really tense and really close. But I think the French kind of back down. They, at the last minutes, kind of like a Cuban Missile Crisis situation almost, but just with lobster. And they eventually reach an agreement where the French can pull lobster, but they share the proceeds with the Brazilians. And they reach a mutually beneficial agreement. But it almost came to gunshots or hostages all over those sweet, sweet lobsters.
I'm trying to put myself, like, what does the average Frenchman think about any of this? I mean, how much do they care about the sweet, sweet lobsters?
Doesn't know about the lobster war.
I think that's probably true. I mean, the average.
My wife pointed out to me that, we think of lobster as a luxury item, and apparently, historically, lobster was a common man's food.
It was peasant food, yeah.
Peasant food. But then as it became understood or known about, it was then marketed or changed to be more of a luxury item.
Yeah. And then pork, which was royal food, became commoner food. Or that's flipped back and forth a few times in history. And then cows obviously have gotten just progressively more expensive as time goes on.
Bacon will always be good.
Yes.
I've never been a bacon fan.
What?
I've never been a bacon fan.
What else can we take away from him?
Where we can still hear him and understand him.
Well, you've taken
what about
my
his
mic
chair?
stand
We can make him
Can we
stand.
take
and
his chair?
my dignity.
That's the lobster war, folks.
All right, I'll go next. The war that I'm going to talk about today is the War of Jenkins' Ear. I try to enunciate that as clearly as possible because that is not usually words that we would put together. So this war took place, it began in 1739. It was a war between the English and the Spanish. At the root of the war, the cause of this has to do with Spanish territory in the Americas and English smugglers, actually. So there were like some trading rights that the English had with the Spanish and some goods that they could trade and some goods that they couldn't trade. And the Spanish started kind of increasingly enforcing that to combat English smuggling and led to some conflicts between vessels between those two countries. And it escalated over time. At some point, there may or may not have been an incident involving a guy named Jenkins. Now,
May or may not.
May or may not. The history on Jenkins is murky.
That's interesting, considering a war was named after him.
Yes. So, this tension between the English and the Spanish is growing. And there are some war hawks in England who are looking for a way to start a war with Spain. And they hear about this guy named Jenkins, who has been carrying around
Leroy. Oh no! Did he just run in? I think
Speaking of
in.
speaking of things that never actually happened,
Exactly.
so apparently there's this guy named Jenkins who had been carrying around like his own pickled ear in a jar for maybe as long as up to 7 years.
Oh,
And the story was that his vessel, I believe it was called the Rebecca, had been stopped by the Spanish and had been searched for smuggled goods, and they had strapped him to the mast of the ship and then sliced his ear and then ripped it off as a form of torture or something.
and he kept it?
And he kept it.
He must have been real popular with the ladies at port.
So he just walked around. I'm just imagining, again, the history on this murky, from tavern to tavern in England, trying to use it to get free drinks. That's how it works in my head.
Ah,
Always about alcohol.
yes.
Again, that part I'm making up, but I think it has a truthiness to
I'm
it.
a war hero.
Yeah.
This is my ear.
So these Warhawks get word of this, and they use this as the justification to go to a war with Spain. Look at how the Spanish have been treating our English sailors. Mm-hmm. Now, there are some accounts, and you can find political cartoons illustrating this, that show him producing the pickled ear jar on the floor of Parliament as part of this debate. Like that these Warhawks brought him to Parliament and is like, have you met Jenkins?
We found him in a bar.
Look what the Spanish did to Jenkins. And then there was a war. Now, that in and of itself is funny enough, but I do think there are a couple of other interesting historical things that happened during this war that I do want to share.
Was this the ear that launched 1,000 ships?
I don't think 1,000, but I think it's safe to say in the hundreds.
What a guy.
Yeah. So most of this war took place in the Americas. It was a battle between the English and Spanish over their land holdings in the Americas. Probably one of the most famous battles involved the English trying to attack a place called Cartagena de Indias in Colombia, where there was this Spanish naval officer named Blas de Lezo, who apparently is like the Spanish naval officer of all time, that they like have statues of this guy. Now, whether it's because he was a great naval officer or because this man lost a leg to a cannonball and they amputated on the field to save him.
Oof.
So this man did not have a left leg. He also lost his left eye in battle.
He's a pirate, basically.
Oof.
And he could not use his right arm because that was broken in War II.
Oof.
So this is a one-eyed, one-legged, one-armed naval officer commanding Spanish forces.
That's how you got to do it.
And the guy refused to wear an eye patch because he was like, "No,
Oh my goodness.
this is a war badge of honor."
Just
so
like
just
the
look
ear.
at my eye or lack thereof.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so this guy is involved in this. So the English are planning to attack this fort at Cartagena, and the English officer actually sends a letter back to England declaring the news of his victory before he attacked the fort. So like the news of his victory got back. They started like minting little coins to celebrate his victory. And he had this wonderful genius plan. He had all these ladders that he had made to climb and get into this fort. And his men were going to sneak in there in the middle of the night and throw the ladders up and get into the Spanish fort. But this Blas de Lezo had a trench dug around the fort.
As you do.
So when the English showed up in the middle of the night with their ladders, they fell into the trench, and their ladders did not reach to the top of the fort anymore because their ladders were just tall enough, and now that there's a trench, it's not tall enough. And so the Spanish are just like unloading on them down in these trenches, and they barely got out alive. Even though they had vastly superior naval force and men, the Spanish held the fort. So that's cool. and wacky.
Forts are hard to take.
They are hard to take, but then this guy did not actually win them in the battle.
Yeah.
No. There were also a bunch of battles between Florida and Georgia, because Florida was Spanish territory and Georgia was English territory, and so they both failed at invading each other once. Apparently, there's some farm in Georgia that still celebrates every year the Battle of Bloody Marsh or something, where they repelled the Spanish invasion there.
Pretty neato bonito.
Yeah. Eventually, this war got wrapped up into a larger European war called the War of Austrian Succession.
Oh.
And
That one I've heard of.
yeah. So the English and Spanish continued to fight each other, but as part of much larger alliances, and pretty much neglected anything that was going on in the Americas. And then the war ended. And do you want to know what changed?
I would love to.
Nothing. All of the borders that existed before the war were there. No new treaty. The treaties that were signed did not change anything about trading rights or anything. Literally nothing changed at the end of the war at all.
So a lot of people died. A lot of stuff was destroyed for nothing.
Yes. The last thing that I will say, this is an American history connection that I thought was really fascinating. One of the officers who served for the British in the war was a guy named Lawrence Washington. He was George Washington's older half-brother.
Ooh.
And in that, he served under a British officer who actually won some battle that was probably the biggest victory for the British. But nothing changed, so who really cares? But the British officer, his last name was Vernon. So when Lawrence Washington came home, he renamed his home to Mount Vernon.
That's a cool connection.
Oh, yeah. So that
How many years from start to end was that?
okay, because it got wrapped up into this war of Austrian succession.
Yeah,
so the
it's
War
a
of
bit
Jenkins,
milky.
the War of Jenkins' Ear by itself was, I think, 2 to 3 years, and then that larger War of Austrian Succession broke out, which I think was another 5 or 6 years. So altogether, it dragged out for like 9 years.
Wow.
And in the end, nothing changed. Well, between England and Spain. Some stuff happened with the Austrian succession bit, but I don't care about that for this.
Well, if you think 9 years is a long war, how about the longest war in Spanish history? 172 years long.
Yikes.
Have you heard of the Huescar-Denmark War?
No?
No?
Not many people have, which is weird, right? Because it's the longest war in Spanish history. Allow me to provide some context. 1796, so this is slightly after Jenkins' Ear, but it's still before the Lobster War. Napoleon and Carlos IV sign the Treaty of San Ildefonso, uniting Spain and France against England. If you know your history, you know that Napoleon was pushed out of Russia in 1812 and finally defeated in 1814. So this is still while he's kind of on the rise. And as part of that treat or treaty, I don't know why they call it a treat instead of a treaty.
Shorter.
One letter.
No, but I mean like the document, so it's not a full
Oh.
treaty, it's just a treaty. I'm making that up.
Yeah, I figured. I finally got your bad joke, though. 13,000 troops from Spain were then sent to the Jutland to defend against English invasion, should the English ever decide to do so. Fast forward to 1808, and Napoleon decides to put Joseph Bonaparte in as king of Spain. And the Spanish government says, yeah, sure, but the Spanish people say, yeah, nah. And they start forming a bunch of their own little governments. That'll come into play later. And all the little governments form one larger government that decides, no, we're not gonna do that. So in 1809, that larger government of Spain allies itself with the United Kingdom against Napoleon.
So we have a French and Spanish alliance and a Spanish-British alliance.
Right,
Okay.
right. And this Spanish-British alliance supersedes the Spanish-French alliance. So now there are 13,000 Spanish troops in enemy territory.
Oops. Sorry, guys.
Sorry, guys. A bunch of them get Dunkirked over to England. They get saved at a beach, but there's still 5,000 that get imprisoned. Spain thinks that this is terrible.
Maybe next time you just find a casual way to get your troops back before you form the alliance.
you undo your alliance that puts your troops in enemy territory.
That's like if you're going to break up with somebody, you make sure you take all your valuables back from them before you do that.
Yeah.
And as repercussions from this imprisonment, one of the smaller little governments that had formed in the city of Huescar decides to declare war on Denmark.
Can you explain to me what Denmark has to do with this?
Because Denmark is where the 13,000 troops were. So the 5,000 troops that get imprisoned are imprisoned specifically in Denmark.
Okay.
And so
why Denmark?
Because that's where they thought that England would invade. Remember? The Jutland is what they were trying to defend.
Yeah.
For context, Huescar declares war on Denmark. Huescar is a city which is so small it has 8 municipal guards for the whole place. Needless to say, no troops are ever sent to Denmark. And Denmark just kind of ignores the declaration and sends no troops back.
That's really mature of Denmark.
Yeah, considering Huescar is at the bottom of Spain, so it's not like Denmark could get to them anyway.
In my mind, I'm just imagining some young tot from Huescar growing up with a personal vendetta against Denmark and then unleashing his built-up generational rage on the...
Anytime there's any Danish, he just throws them off the table.
So that was 1809. They declare war. 1814 comes around. Napoleon has officially lost.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Treaty of Paris is signed. Huescar forgets to declare peace.
That wasn't on the agenda.
So a cultural officer and historian in Granada rediscovers the declaration of war in 1981 with no declaration of peace to follow, and decides that it's hilarious.
Because it is.
Because it is. And publishes it in the local newspaper, which gets a bunch of head scratching, and it makes Danish news. After some town-held debates, they decide to unilaterally end the war.
Very good.
The Danish ambassador promises, quote, that he would do whatever it took to set things right with the small town. And on November 11th, 1981, he traveled to Huescar with a delegation of Danes all dressed up as Vikings with shields that read, Danish Hispanic friends. The people of Huescar, in turn, put up large posters and banners across the town and the entrance that warned them in Danish, attention Danes, you are entering enemy territory. If you go ahead, beware of the consequences.
We'll send our 8 guards on you.
Yeah.
The townsfolk were given free wine and a day off to celebrate, and they ratified a peace treaty together. So altogether, a 172-year war was ended with no casualties on either side, and it still remains the longest war in Spanish history.
I love that story.
That's good.
That's so heartwarming.
Yeah, it's a heartwarming tale.
But it's reminiscent of all these like old laws that get put on the books for inane reasons and then just get forgotten about. And then
it makes me wonder what other wars were declared in Europe.
Are there lost
that have
wars?
just been forgotten about? Are there lost wars? I'm sure.
That could be a whole YouTube channel, just lost wars to history.
Yeah.
So I know it's not my turn, but now that we're in this lighthearted mood, I thought I would destroy it.
Oh.
and talk
That's mean of you.
and talk about the Philippine-American War. Did you ever study the Philippine-American War when you were in school? Does this sound familiar to either of you?
It sounds familiar, but I know nothing of it.
Yeah, I think that's probably because it's probably the most embarrassing war in American history as far as we have ideals as a country. Democracy, freedom, rule of law, rights.
When convenient.
We did not follow any of them in this war. And, I'm calling this a dumb war because it's dumb that we did it. But there's a lot of things in it that are just sad. But I felt as a U.S. history teacher that I should take on the challenge of deciding what I think the dumbest war in American history is, and I picked this one. So let me tell you about the Philippine-American War. It began in 1898, right on the tail end of the Spanish-American War. Yes. I just wanted to make sure that when I put 1898 in my notes here, that's what I was referencing, and it is. So the Spanish-American War you are probably familiar with. Remember the main. We have to liberate Cuba from the Spanish because the Spanish are being oppressors to Cuba, and we must free them. And we signed a treaty saying when we declared war, we would not take control of Cuba. We did not, in that, say that we would not take control of anything else, and so the Philippines enter. Conveniently. So, the Philippines had been fighting a war of independence from Spain up until that point. In fact, the Filipino people, under the leadership of a guy named Aguinaldo, had effectively liberated all of the Philippines except for the capital city of Manila. They had surrounded the capital city of Manila and had, in fact, had 15,000 Spanish troops that they were holding captive, and they were just waiting for Manila to surrender.
That's a lot of troops.
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah. And then the Americans showed up with their boats to attack the Spanish. And they found they were pretty well defeated already. And that led to us attacking the Spanish at a place called the Battle of Manila Bay, where the American Navy fought the Spanish Navy. Now, that is kind of dumb because the American Navy, steel. Spanish Navy, wood.
Bit of a difference there.
Needless to say, the United States won that battle. And when we won that battle, Aguinaldo, the Philippine independence leader, welcomed us as heroes who were going to help liberate the Philippines from Spanish rule. He actually turns over his 15,000 Spanish prisoners to the Americans. It is at that point that it becomes clear that the United States is not interested in liberating the Philippines. And the siege of the city goes on, and now there's kind of like the Americans there, there's the people of the Philippines there, and then there's the Spanish troops that are trapped in Manila. And there's the commander of the Spanish troops actually surrenders his forces to Aguinaldo. Mm-hmm. And gets fired by the Spanish, who put a new guy in charge, who then surrenders his troops to the Americans. But before he surrenders his troops to the Americans, they stage a mock battle between the American and the Spanish forces called the Mock Battle of Manila.
Interesting.
Where some people did die on both sides.
Oops. That's dumb.
Yes. And then he surrenders his forces over to Commodore George Dewey, who is the American who is present there, also surrendering the Philippines as a whole.
Right.
To the Americans.
Because they're still technically Spanish, because the Spanish didn't technically lose. They were just stuck in a city.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes. So the Spanish-American War ends. We sign a treaty to end the war with Spain. As part of that treaty, we pay Spain $20 million for the Philippines.
Okay.
At which point, Aguinaldo restarts this war of independence, but this time against the Americans. Now, when we sign this treaty...
Good man. Yeah, good man.
When we sign this treaty to end the war with Spain, we say, oh, look, we're going to take control of the Philippines. It's good for them, because they need some protection. If we don't take control of the Philippines, some other European country is going to take control of the Philippines, like Germany. And so if we stay here, then it's better for them, and it's also good for us. So this war breaks out now between the Philippines and the American forces. We have superior weapons. There's like one really open battle, like traditional head-to-head battle. It does not go well for the people of the Philippines. So they shift towards guerrilla warfare methods, as you do. Of course, the problem with that is that if they shift to guerrilla warfare methods, hiding in ambushing American troops, that builds suspicion and tension and distrust of all Filipino people, and it leads to the United States start embarking on scorched earth campaigns where they burn down entire villages. We built concentration camps in the Philippines and rounded up Filipino civilians and put them in concentration camps.
Yikes.
Yeah, where thousands of them died from starvation and malnutrition and disease.
Wow.
Yeah, we didn't intentionally. They weren't death camps, but they were concentration camps. Things escalate from there. We start torturing Filipino people for information. Apparently, the most common form of torture was something called the water cure, where they would just hold open people's mouths and pour water into them until they became like distended with so much water.
Goodness.
And then roll them around to try to like get the water back out of them. It's like a torture interrogation method. There's records of them like injecting water up people's noses with syringes. So then the Filipino people start capturing American soldiers and torturing them and mutilating them. There's stories of them burying American soldiers alive. In one instance, there's an account of a soldier who was buried with just his head above ground, and then they poured sugar all over him, so the ants came to get to him.
I've heard of that before.
Yeah, so they're doing stuff like that, and it only escalated from there. It was brutal on both sides. Obviously, the United States didn't really need to be there in the first place, and so I think we probably bear a little bit more responsibility from there. It ultimately kind of came to an end around 1901. The United States manages to capture Aguinaldo. They forced him to swear an oath of loyalty to the United States. He urged his followers to surrender, and most of them scaled down the combat. Not all. There's another revolutionary leader rises up to take his place, and he fights on for a little while. But ultimately, probably the nail in the coffin on this one was Teddy Roosevelt actually became president of the United States. William McKinley, who had been the president who had been waging this war against the Philippines, gets assassinated. And Teddy Roosevelt was his vice president. He becomes president. The details of all of the injustices the United States had done to these people kind of was becoming increasingly public knowledge. People were getting upset. It actually is probably responsible for the American populace as a whole becoming anti-imperialist, because in the wake of the Spanish-American War, America was a little bit excited about that idea. And he decides not to give up the Philippines, but to work with them to try to create a path towards independence. And so he appoints a guy named William Taft to be in charge of the Philippines, governor of the Philippines, with the understanding that he would work with the people to try to move them towards self-government. So the war ends mostly in 1902. Not entirely. There's a group called the Moro who were in the southern Philippines who actually continued to rebel until 1913. But that pretty much brings an end to it. The United States would continue to occupy and govern the Philippines until after World War II. In 1946, they're actually granted their independence.
Were they what were they before the Spanish came? Were they in a collective nation, or
I don't think they viewed themselves as a collective nation. I mean, I think that's one of the products of European imperialism, is that to a large degree it created national identities, because I don't think there's anything really more unifying than having a shared enemy. Unfortunately,
Very true.
Which modern political parties have used to their advantage, but
Not a great mark in history for the United States, for sure.
No.
There's not many great marks in history for the United States.
There are, Ben.
Such a pessimist.
I think there are plenty. I think if we want to say again, this event, when the average American heard about it, they were ashamed of it. I think that says something. Now, the leaders, the people who are doing, like William McKinley, who's going around and promoting this as good for the people of the Philippines, not a hero in this story.
Right.
I mean, I guess now that leads to the whole Mount McKinley thing, but we won't get into that.
Not today, no. Mr. Walter, do you want to go next? Or otherwise, I can go.
You can go.
Alrighty.
I did a great job of destroying his good humor.
Well, I did a good humor one, and then you did that. And I think it would be in poor taste to jump back to my tone immediately.
Mine's a little bit more lighthearted. It only involves one person being stabbed.
Oh, wonderful.
Not how many people dying in concentration camps? Thousands?
Thousands. Yeah. The estimates, I try to get a measure of how many people died in this war, and the estimates vary widely based on if you calculate just combat deaths, because once you get into starvation and disease and stuff, it's harder to say how many of those are attributed to the war itself. Those who, the highest number I saw was 1 million.
Wow.
I think most would say maybe as many as 200,000.
Okay, on that order of magnitude.
Yeah.
Man, that's a lot.
It's still a lot.
Yeah. Okay, we are going back just completely stateside for this. Now, do you two know what state I grew up in, what I call home?
Michigan, right?
Yeah, Michigan. Mm-hmm. And if you grew up in Michigan, maybe some of our listeners are from Michigan, you may be more familiar with this war. Have you heard of the Toledo War?
I've heard of it, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, same. I mean, I feel like once you start talking about it, I'm like, oh, yeah, that. I just didn't know that that's what it was called.
When I was researching this, I have a distinct memory of grade school learning about this, probably just because it was Michigan. And it's a fascinating part of Michigan and Ohio history. And now that I think about it, I wonder if this lends to the reason why there's such a rivalry between Michigan and Ohio in college sports. My brother and my late father just had the utmost hatred for Ohio State. The Ohio State.
The Ohio State.
I would bet it's that sports rivalry is more just a matter of they were both really good at the same time and were constantly fighting for that top spot, and the fact that you're in close geographic proximity matters. Or maybe it's a little bit like that Wisconsin-Illinois thing, too, where all these people from the South invade us in the summer to enjoy our beautiful lakes and scenery.
Yeah, we get that in Michigan, too.
Yeah.
We would get that. Anyway, so we are dialing the clock back all the way to 1787, where we've got the Northwest Ordinance, which lays out the process for making new states. And part of this is doing survey and map work for some of the new territories. I'm looking at this map of Michigan made in 1787, and gentlemen, it looks, so you know how it's supposed to look like a mitten?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This looks like a very mutilated hand mitten. Like the map work here is terrible. I don't know if you can see it on my screen. If you reach over.
Oh, Butamus.
Like that's supposed to be Michigan.
It looks like a shark fin.
You know,
with a bite out of it.
yeah.
Map making's a lot harder than it looks.
Yeah.
I mean, before GPS, using only compass, whatever other map you had available, and what other survey tools? Sextant.
You could use a sextant. You could use what do you call the flat plane that you set up with the stick to tell how high up and stuff like that?
Flat plane with stick to tell how high elevation of something.
You tell a change in elevation. You have to set up a perfectly level
theodolite?
flat plane.
Is that it?
I know not.
That one gives
I'm
you the
asking
angle.
you.
Okay, too much of a rabbit hole here. Anyway, the tools were crude. The map was equally as crude. And this led...
They did their best.
They did their best, yeah. But so Ohio in 1802 is trying to enter statehood. And they suspect that they have more land than what is currently allotted them. So they put this clause in their state constitution defining their state boundary, everything that fell south of Maumee Bay, Maumee, Maumee Bay, and to try to gain more land. And Michigan doesn't like this because this feels like they are encroaching into their territory. Michigan is not yet a state. This area, which would eventually house Toledo, has some land up against Lake Huron, I believe. And waterways during that point were very key for transporting goods. They had just worked on this part of the St. Lawrence Seaway. They were envisioning a waterway, which we currently have, that would allow the Great Lakes to be connected to the Atlantic Ocean. They also, at some point, wanted to connect it to the Mississippi River. That never happened. Looking at the ecological torment that the lakes went through, it's probably good that it's not connected to the Mississippi River. Anyway, there becomes this argument about whose land should this be. This Toledo Strip gets made, and it's a land of contention. Should it go to Michigan or should it go to Ohio? Both wanting it because of the water rights and the transportation that you can get from it. And there starts to ramp up these militias. Michigan starts to eat into their treasury. They raise funds for a militia to try to occupy the land. And eventually there is enough military presence for both the militias of Michigan and Ohio that the federal government has to step in. And I believe it is President Jackson, Andrew Jackson, that has to send in some delegates to cool down what would be an armed confrontation over this land. There is, like I mentioned, there's one casualty. There's a Michigan deputy sheriff who gets stabbed trying to arrest some Ohio people, but he did not die.
Some Ohio people.
Some Ohioans.
Those Ohioans.
Versus the Michiganders. So anyway, moving on, they've got this intervention, and Michigan has this frostbitten convention where they're running low on money. They can't sustain the militia. They kind of have to concede that we're going to have to give this land to Ohio, but we want something, so they get the rest of the chunk of land in what is currently the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which at that point was seen as worthless land. But thankfully to Michigan, that land would be rich in timber. They also discovered mineral deposits, namely copper is one mineral that was heavily mined in the UP. I got to visit a copper mine one time, and my oldest son was just enthralled with, we went out to Colorado this year, as you know, if you watch the podcast, and my son was just enthralled with this idea of copper being in the ground. He bought like a native piece of native copper, and I think it actually was from Michigan. But anyway, so there's thankfully a happy end of the story where Michigan gets the UP, which is rich in resources, and Ohio gets its land of the Toledo Strip.
The UP should be part of Wisconsin.
It was on the Mountain Dew bottles.
Apparently, we aren't war-y enough. Like, if we would have threatened Michigan over the UP, would we have gotten part of Minnesota?
I don't know.
That's an interesting hypothetical.
And it's just like dominoes across the country.
Remember the Mountain Dew campaign where they were putting all of the states on the bottles, and you were supposed to collect all 50, and you had a chance to win something, and they put the Upper Peninsula on the wrong state?
I don't remember that.
Wow. What a time to be alive. Don't know where I was going with that.
Back when people drank that much Mountain Dew.
It was the lifeblood of high schoolers in the aughts, at least for me.
Yeah. I don't think I drank Mountain Dew that much until high school. And then
It was the energy
I
drink
stopped.
of students before energy drinks existed.
yeah, I drank it when I had to do programming competitions and I wouldn't get any sleep. One morning I remember fondly, maybe this should be a dumb thing. Too late now. I've started the story. One morning I remember fondly I had Fruit Loops with Mountain Dew instead of milk.
Oh my goodness. Sugar on sugar.
That was a good way to wake up for a high schooler.
How was the flavor on that?
Better than you would think. Because Mountain Dew is citrus.
Yeah.
And then
It's all fruity flavors.
Fruit Loops are the taste of different colors. I wouldn't say they taste like fruit.
That's
One
why
of
they
them
say
tastes like the color red.
Yeah.
One of them tastes like the color blue.
Yes.
Yes.
Have any of you been to UP?
I've driven through
It's
it.
beautiful.
I love the UP.
It
my
is-
favorite drive, Highway 2 up in the UP. We're actually going to do that this weekend to get to Mackinac. We do that every Labor Day weekend.
It is paradise comparative to the rest of Michigan.
One time, he's right. One time we were driving. We were driving through there. I was listening to a podcast, John Green, Anthropocene Reviewed, and he's talking about that song everybody sings on New Year's, Old Lang Syne.
Mm-hmm.
And it's this really like emotional thing about to people that have gotten you to where you are today. And it's like my wife and I are in the front seat kind of like half crying, listening to him talk about that idea. And we drove past a dead deer on the side of the road that somebody had tied a helium get well soon balloon to.
I've seen that before. We had one of those outside my workplace in North Dakota. The deer was on the road for about a week, and once it was bloated and its legs were sticking up, someone tied the balloon to it.
Get well soon.
Get well soon.
Oh, my.
That's a popular thing in the United States for those of you outside the country. If you ever come visit, feel free to do that.
There's plenty of dead animals on the side of the road.
Yeah, you could do it with possums. You could do it with
raccoons.
armadillos in the South. It's a good time.
Take us home, Mr. Walter.
Take us home. But before I get to my last war,
Ah, yes.
I think I should probably get something off my chest.
Please do.
Thank you. Thank you. J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, a lot of people love Tolkien.
Do they love him or do they love his books? I mean,
Do they love him or do they? A lot of people fangirl over Tolkien.
I know. I had a poster of him on my wall in high school.
Yeah,
No.
with him with his pipe. He was quite the character. And I'm not going to attack the man too specifically, but
Proceeds to attack him specifically.
okay. I don't want to say that Tolkien's writing is not good. Could I write better than Tolkien? No. I would say that Tolkien's writing certainly annoys me in quite a few instances. His dialogue is rubbish for most of the Fellowship of the Ring. It gets better when you get into Rohan and Gondor. It certainly picks up. He's got a lot of great ideas in his books.
World building, right?
World building. I will say I have all 3 books plus the Silmarillion up in my office right now. The Silmarillion, way better than the trilogy because he was a historian at heart, not really whatever else he thought he was. My problem with Tolkien is that Tolkien, although he wasn't as bad as I say he was not as good as he thought he was. Especially when it comes to picking fights with other authors. Tolkien didn't like amazing other books at the time. That was poorly worded. Things like Dune which is understandable because the worldview of Dune is very different from the worldview of Tolkien. But Tolkien also really didn't like the Chronicles of Narnia.
Well, it was written by his friend,
Which
right?
was written by his best friend, a man who
Lewis.
he would show up to parties dressed together as polar bears. Not dress-up parties, mind you, just parties.
Life goals right there.
Life goals. Find yourself a pal like that.
Hey, next grad party we both get invited to.
Yeah. But he didn't like the Chronicles of Narnia. Even stranger, the man didn't like Shakespeare. He never forgave Shakespeare for what he did with fairies, which is just a weird grudge to hold.
Over a man who you never met.
Yes. And he thought Shakespeare was lazy. Particularly in his handling of how he undid the prophecy in Macbeth, for which Tolkien wrote an undoing of his own prophecy as a rebuttal in the form of the Witch King of Angmar, which I think is way lazier. I am no man. Yeah, it was a hobbit with an enchanted blade, which is kind of written off, and then a woman. You did great there, Tolkien. No! So, in summary, TLDR, Tolkien kind of overhyped.
I have seen that thumbnail on YouTube, like Tolkien's thoughts on Dune and other great literary works, and he just
didn't like any of them.
He had the hot takes that now everyone can dissect, and
he thought he was better than all of them.
Use it to bash other great works of literature.
And I'm sorry, Tolkien, the hobbits are just annoying. They're just annoying. They were fine in The Hobbit when it was a kid's book, and then it just got more and more grating the further you go into The Lord of the Rings.
I'm going to give you A for specific details and passion. I don't know what category this would be, but it's just such a niche thing that, like, overall I would have to drop the grade a little bit because it like, I don't know how many other people can sympathize with your rant here.
We've all had that student who shows up like on the day of the test. And as they're walking into the room, says, "There's a test today?"
Without fail,
Every time.
Not ironically,
Just
either.
completely shocked and surprised to find out that it was a test day. Was not prepared, didn't do their homework, and yet still gets an A.
I feel so special having come into this podcast and saying, "Oh no, I forgot to write the rant." I'm glad I could deliver.
The nichiness of it actually raised his score for me.
Oh. Let's wrap this up, shall we?
Bring us home, Mr. Walter.
Let's go home to that great America on the other side of the globe, Australia.
Bluey. That's the second thing that comes, well, maybe the first thing that comes to mind now, having kids.
Go down 2 aisles and take a left. If you pass the flamingos, you've gone too far.
Good.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anyone from Australia listening, I'm sorry for how I just butchered that accent. Australia, let's set the stage. It's 1922. The Australian government has just changed emu's status from that of protected native species to, quote, vermin. Australia decides to increase its wheat production, particularly along the coast. And the World War I, World War I apparently, has just ended recently. So they get a lot of veterans who have never farmed before farming wheat. And they're not good at it. They are struggle busing hard.
I mean, everybody thinks they can farm, Not everybody can farm.
Not
It's
everybody
that
can
easy.
farm, especially in a desert wasteland known as Australia.
1920s architect.
Inspired
Yeah.
dude,
Infrastructure.
I think. Right?
Yeah. No, that was the.
It was a joke.
I'm
can
not
answer
getting
it.
any of your jokes today.
Moving on.
Those were the Oregon dunes. And the McCarthy era. Story for another time. They're not good at it. And the government, as the Great Depression hits, decides that they're going to promise subsidies for wheat farmers. But it's the Great Depression, so they never deliver on those subsidies. The farmers are struggling, and because the subsidies are promised, wheat production increases, which makes prices
Go down.
plummet. In October, farmers are preparing to harvest, but they were never given the subsidies, so they're refusing to deliver the wheat because of the aforementioned everything. Then a drought hits.
Oh, yikes.
It was really a rough time.
This is a rough time for Australia. Enter 20,000 emus, stage left. A note to everyone who's not familiar with emus. They are large, flightless birds, not to be confused with ostriches, and they are migratory, usually moving to the coast after their breeding period. And especially after the drought that hit the Midlands, the emus migrate to the coast and find a promised land of wheat that is not currently being harvested because of arguments going on.
It's the perfect storm.
The perfect storm. So now the wasteland that is Australia is cultivated, and the emus decide that they're going to live there.
Emu paradise.
Emu paradise. Been spending most of my life living in an emu paradise. They eat the crops. They destroy the fences, which is even worse, because then they let the rest of the vermin in, like rabbits, which Australia was already struggling with for decades. They brought the rabbits for food, right?
I think
they brought that problem on themselves too.
like the giant,
like the cane toads
yeah, I was
to
gonna say
follow.
the giant toads that are afflicting them now.
Yeah, because they brought the cane beetles. And then they needed to bring the cane toads to fight the beetles.
Isn't this like
It's
this
a vicious cycle.
This is There Was an Old Lady Who Swallowed a Fly, but
That
Australia
is what
edition.
Australia is.
An old lady.
They're like, yeah, you know what we need to fight these beetles? Another poisonous animal. Don't worry about it. Okay, we're talking about emus. They destroy the fences, more vermin get in. The farmers can shoot them legally. They can, but they don't have the resources.
They're big birds.
So they call on the military. Enter Minister of Defense, stage right.
Looking for a win for Australia.
Looking for a win for Australia. And he decides to declare war on the emus. He hires 3 members of the Royal Australian Artillery.
Artillery.
Yes.
Well, it's probably more things were considered artillery at that
Headed
point.
by a man, yes, this is just after World War I, please note. Headed by a man named Major Meredith. And they have 2 Lewis automatic machine guns with 10,000 rounds of ammunition and 1 cinematographer.
We have to capture our
So you
exploits.
can find footage of this.
Oh my.
Not of them gunning them down, but it's like, and news from the mark.
That wasn't Australian enough.
News from the mark, innit? Again, Australia, I apologize for that accent. For those of you that care, you already know what a Lewis automatic machine gun is. But for those of you that don't care, I'm going to force you to listen to it anyway. It is a World War I light machine gun fed with a top-mounted Pan magazine that can hold somewhere between 47 or 97 rounds, depending on the size. Interchangeable at the top, like a record player, just a lot more heavy. It is a fascinating design if you ever want to go down a rabbit hole of machine gun loading.
Machine gun?
Machine gun loading.
Is this a handheld weapon or fired on a tripod?
It is fired on a tripod, although in the footage that they have it resting on another man's shoulder as they fire it. That is possible because it is equipped with a finned, breech-to-muzzle aluminum heat sink surrounded by a cooling shroud, which pulled air in as it was fired to cool the barrel.
That's a nice design.
That way, they didn't have to pour water over the top of it like a Gatling gun to keep it cool. And it fired 500 to 600 RPM, but could be upgraded to 800 for aircraft variants. And it was a total of about 13 kilos. That's 30 pounds.
It's a little hefty.
Little hefty, but still considered a light machine gun. They enter around November 2nd and decide to employ formation tactics against a group of 50 hostiles for their first encounter. As soon as they open fire, the emus scatter in all directions, and it's largely a failure. November 4th, they lay an ambush for emus at a water source. They waited for thousands to be in range, and the gun jammed after a couple of rounds. So all of them got away. After the first 3 days, they averaged only 10 emus per day, meaning this operation was on pace to have only 2,000 days to completion.
I don't think that calculates the birth rate of the emus.
I don't think so either, as we'll soon find out. They tried to change their tactics. They herd emus with trucks, but ended up hitting an emu and crashing. They tried to shoot from a truck, but the emus were faster than the truck in the rough terrain, and the LMGs are not easy to aim. Emus have natural armor in the form of tough hides, so glancing bullets rarely killed them or even severely injured them.
Holy cow.
Come November 8th, news reports were laughing at them, and the House of Representatives were making fun of them, saying they should give medals to the emus.
I've heard this.
And they decided to withdraw. Ornithologist Dominic Cervanti said, quote, I'm not going to do this in an Australian accent. The machine gunner's dreams of point-blank fire into serried masses of emus was soon dissipated. The emu command had evidently ordered guerrilla tactics, and its unwieldy armor soon split up into innumerable small units that made use of the military equipment uneconomic. A crestfallen field force therefore withdrew from combat area after about a month.
You know what they should have done? And I don't know if they do this or not. They should have taken this battle to the skies where the emus can't go.
Oh. I think that's ableist of you. The farmers, however, demanded them return. Because as little as they were doing, they were deterring the emus from getting into the fields, which was helping them a little bit, and evading famine to some degree. And following a report to Parliament, or wherever it was, from Base Command, mind you, that they had actually killed around 300 emus.
Thank you very much.
Quote unquote. They were justified for redeployment. On the second tour,
Suit up, boys. We're going back.
Major Meredith, following the second tour, said that they had a confirmed kill count of 986 emus, with exactly 2,500 dying from injuries as well, at a rate of 10 rounds per kill.
Okay.
The dubiousness of these numbers is long disputed, but they do know that they spent around 9,860 rounds of ammunition on the second tour, and that was too much for them to allow them to continue this operation. Major Meredith also stated that the emus, quote, faced machine gun fire with the invulnerability of tanks
What a quote.
and compared them to Zulu warriors. Emus were declared the victors of the war. The government switched tactics and simply began arming the farmers and issuing bounties for the emus. Over the next 6 months, 57,000 bounties were collected.
Holy cow. So
And
these
considering 20,000 were the original that entered, that was quite a bit extra.
maybe it was good that the farmers were former soldiers.
Probably. Yeah. The war was considered unpopular in total, despite the impact on emus to humans and the general struggles they were having during the Great Depression at the time. And it was eventually ceased due to the uproars of not only the war, but the bounties were ceased thanks to uproars caused by conservationists from the UK. I'm not sure anyone in Australia cared. I'm sure if they started bounties for ibises, they would have at it right now.
For those of you who are curious, the current conservation status of the emu is least concern.
Yes. And in 1999, emus became a protected species in Australia.
That
Yeah. I would be interested in more of the military career of Meredith here.
I should dig into that and see what I can find for a future episode.
Because I can't. When he found out that this was his job, we're deploying you.
You know why it was his job?
No, I don't.
Because he was one of the few men in the country still in military service with machine gun expertise.
which was a rarity in that time.
So
Apparently,
maybe he was just happy that he had a
machine
job.
gunner. Yeah, maybe.
But then I imagine there's
There's a lot to unpack here.
I'm just imagining this as like a Ben Stiller movie.
They did make a movie about it.
Steve Carell as
in 2023 or 2024, allegedly, and apparently John Cleese is working on an adaptation as of this year.
that fits.
I think I'm looking forward to that if that comes out.
Yes.
But John Cleese is very old, so
Yeah. It's true.
hopefully he finishes it.
Or someone else carries
And
the
they
torch.
get funding.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I think it's time for closing thoughts. As I sit here having listened to all of this dumbness, I just keep thinking about like what's worth fighting for, and imagining the soldiers, like in many of these instances, who really had to shoot things over the causes that have been described here, and in hindsight, just seem ridiculous. But how easily do we fall into the thing? You get wrapped up in the emotions of a moment, and are in some cases maybe manipulated by an ear in a jar into going to war over nothing. I guess I'm thinking we should spend more time thinking. Instead of rushing into things.
Truly, war never changes. Whether you're fighting emus or each other. It's all just people being dumb. At the end of the day, most wars are dumb. And it's just a matter of whether or not we feel justified to do it. So I hope in the future we can take a lesson from the Huescar-Denmark War and start wars that we then forget about for 172 years.
I like that.
I think the world might be a safer place.
I think it is interesting that we live in a time where right now, I don't live in fear of being called up to fight in a war in the immediate future. I don't fear that for my children. I have 3 boys, so if I would have lived in another time, there would have been a time where I'd have to talk to them about, this is how you'd kill a man, or this is how you would act and behave in military. And so we're blessed to be able to live in that time. And like what Mr. Linton was saying, you can be stripped of everything that you own, everything that you are. Your identity can be taken away from you. You still have the power of choice. You still have your reaction to things happening around you. So to add more to what he said, think more. Still act. Still do. Don't let it be an excuse to not act, but think more about how you react and your actions. And so our homework for today will be, you should do some research as well. See what other silly conflicts are out there. Do some sleuthing. Can you find other wars that have been declared but not resolved? And then maybe you could have you can get your country, your county or state a day off and celebrate with another country from across the globe. Wouldn't that be nice?
Wouldn't it be nice?
Wouldn't it be nice? We don't get a copyright strike. I think
I think you could probably get away with about that much, but
just about that much. Thank you for listening. If you have any ideas for any future episodes or topics or questions, email us at smartestguyspod@gmail.com or drop a comment to the YouTube video, or what other platforms have comments?
You could leave a comment on Spotify, but we don't see those easily. So it's best if you leave them on YouTube.
Yeah. Or if you know us through other channels, we love to talk to you about other ideas.
We live to serve you.
Sorry, Mr. Lynn, I'm taking your job. Back to you.
No.
Think more, fight less. America.
Class dismissed.